Emma, are you sure this is a good idea? I mean, we don't know any of these people. Relax, Liam, I've talked to them a lot online. The women were very nice and helpful. They gave me lots of suggestions, and without their help, I'm not sure we'd be where we are now in our relationship. Besides, it's what I want. Emma gave me a glare as she finished, although a quick one, and smiling as she did. I stayed quiet after her response, watching nervously as she followed the GPS directions toward the house where the party was scheduled. Turning down a side street, we made our way in the car. The street was lined with big shade trees and houses from the turn of the century. Most had been restored and the whole area looked quaint even at night. As Emma got near the house, she saw a parking spot and pulled her car into it. Picking up her phone, she turned off the GPS and then started texting. "What are you doing?" Linda told me to text her when we got here, so she could tell us what to do. I nervously watched her send the text and then heard her phone ping as the reply came in. Emma put the phone in her purse and started to get out. I followed as we made our way to the house. It was a narrow, 3-story building, brick exterior, short stairs from the street to a covered porch with an alley down one side and a mix of trees and shrubs in the yard. A typical closed-in suburban house. She turned to me as we reached the foot of the concrete stairs. "You have to go to the back door. Linda said only women can enter through the front door. Boys have to go in through the back. Don't worry, someone will let you in and then you can join me inside the house. Love you." She kissed me on the cheek before starting up the stair. I went down the alley and around to the back of the house. There was a small wooden porch centered on the rear door. The door had a pane of glass covered by a sheer curtain, so the light shone through. But you couldn't see any details inside. I lightly knocked on the wood frame, as I didn't see a doorbell. I was about to knock again when I saw a shadowy movement through the window pane and the door opened. I gingerly stepped inside, unsure what was going to happen. The woman who had opened the door was about my height, slender with curly brown hair, and looked to be about 10 years older than me. She was dressed casually in jeans, a tee, cardigan sweater, and flats. She smiled at me as she shut the door behind me. "Welcome. I'm Linda, Emma's in the living room. We'll join her as soon as you're ready. Pick out a box, get undressed and put your clothes in the box." Linda had pointed toward the floor where there were 3 or 4 cardboard liquor boxes sitting there. We were in a mud room, a small area that transitioned from the rear door to a hallway. I had expected this, but it didn't make it easier to hear. Emma had told me the party was a CFNM event. I had no idea what she meant, and even after her explanation that the acronym was short for Clothed Female Nude Male, I wasn't sure why we were going to it. She further explained that she had gone online to seek some advice after I asked her if she would be willing to have a female-led relationship with me in chastity. The group had invited her to this party. We had been dating for 6 months. We were getting serious about each other quickly and moved in to live together. I had decided she was the kind of woman I wanted to serve. I had been practicing self-locking chastity with a cheap plastic cage for some time and knew I wanted to do more, including using a more solid metal design. She would be a perfect key holder, in my mind. But I understood how unusual all of this sounded to her, as it wasn't common practice. She had resorted to an online fetish community for information and had found a dedicated group of chastity practitioners. A female-led group who not only chatted online but got together once a month for parties, like this one. After talking to her online friends for a couple of months, learning a lot about the whole scene, Emma felt the next step for us was to attend a party. A CFNM party. So here we were. I glanced up at Linda and then, taking a deep breath, picked out a box. I slowly began to get undressed, while Linda stood there the whole time watching. I had thought about the idea, being nude in front of women, strangers who I didn't know. I was very uneasy about it, but Emma had insisted. If I wanted her to take control and hold my key, I would do this. We'd done a little chastity play so far, using the plastic cage I had bought before I met her. It was not a great fit, as I could only wear it a few days at a time. But it was enough for me to find out I really liked her keeping my key. So I agreed to do the party. Surprisingly, she'd unlocked me, so I could attend without my cage. Actually going through with it was much harder though. I had already removed my shoes, shirt, slipped off my pants and put them in the box. The last two items were the hardest, my socks and underwear. So I did them more or less together, straightening up after I put the clothes in my box. Linda didn't say anything at first, just looked me over really intently, making no effort to hide what she was doing. I felt my face blush as I was self-conscious about my appearance. I was not tall nor muscular, as I never worked out or played sports. My frame was slender with pale skin and light blonde hair. But that wasn't what embarrassed me. Like most men, I was sensitive about my penis, more accurately the size of it. I knew I was small, below average, really quite below average. Luckily for me, Emma was okay about it. Once we had sex a few times, she quickly shifted my focus on her, from using my cock to using my mouth. It didn't take her long to show me how to please her orally, and we settled into that as our primary sexual act. She would use her fingers and a few toys too, to climax multiple times. I actually liked it because I was able to help her climax, something I had never done for a woman with my cock. That was one of the reasons I felt she was right woman for me, because she took charge that way. The only negative was one of her toys was a large, thick dildo. She'd come multiple times with it, which sort of emphasized how mine was inadequate. But she would always make sure I had some pleasure too, although not every time she did. I loved her touch as she would quickly relieve me of my erections. Of course, just because she was cool about my size, didn't make me comfortable having other women see it. The other reason I was shy was as a result of a couple of things Emma had insisted on. Once she agreed to be my key holder, she thought it would help her control and my submission if I was feminized a bit. So she implemented a few requirements. First, I had to be smooth all over, so I had shaved my body hair including around my cock. It made me feel and look so different. More like the way I looked before I went through puberty. Another thing she insisted on was that I keep my toenails polished all the time. When I offered to serve her, I began by doing housework and then offered to do personal services, like doing her nails. She liked that, except I had never polished any before. So before I was allowed to give her pedicures, she made me practice on myself. I soon got the hang of it and could do hers effortlessly with excellent results. But the damage was done, as Emma liked mine being polished too. She had extended that look to my fingernails, requiring that I keep them moderately long and shaped in a soft oval. She'd have me polish them too, on weekends. So the tips of my fingers glittered in the soft light tonight. Often we matched, but tonight mine were a bubblegum pink and a very shiny, wet look with glitter. It gave my hands, feet and by extension, my smooth hairless legs, an extremely girly look. I also featured her latest requirement, something we'd only done once or twice. So new in fact, that she had to apply it for me. My lips were coated in a wet look lip gloss that matched my nails, and my eyes were highlighted by mascara and soft pink eyeshadow. One of her first steps of my feminization was that she'd taken me to get my ears pierced. Usually I wore simple gold stud earrings, but tonight Emma had insisted I wear some medium hoops that had a small bell on the hoop. They were a very feminine design. So standing there, nude, with feminized features, while this stranger looked me over was making me both nervous and humiliated. I could almost feel my cock shrinking as it was kind of cool inside the house too. Finally, Linda motioned for me to pick up the box and follow her. We went a short distance down the hall, to a closet. Using a key on a bracelet around her wrist, Linda unlocked it and opened the door. Stacked inside were boxes, like mine, with clothes. I put mine inside. After I did so, she looked at the back of the closet. Along the back wall were a series of coat hooks, each with several collars hanging on them. Wide leather collars, metal chain collars, dog collars, all types, and each with a big ring at the front. Linda glanced at me again and reached in to get one. She brought out a narrow, leather one, pink with glittery jewels along it. On either side of the metal ring were two silver bells, softly chiming. She looked at me, Turn around and hold up your hair for me. She didn't sound mean, but forceful. I quickly obeyed, my pulse really starting to race. My hair, a dirty blonde, reached to my shoulders, so I lifted it up to expose my neck. Linda reached around, positioned the collar on my neck and buckled it. A light click indicated she'd locked it in place. Stepping aside so she could shut and lock the door again, I saw my image in a mirror on the wall. The collar gave my face a softer look, as it was a feminine style. Linda smiled as she saw me looking. I think it goes well with your nail polish and makeup, and your overall sweet look. We require all of our boys to be collared. I keep some here at the house in case we have guests. Although if she likes it, Emma can keep it for you. I find that most women enjoy having their boys collared. The ring comes in handy for lots of things, and in your case, those little bells will tell her where you're at and what you're doing at all times. Now follow me and we'll join the party. There are just a few rules for boys. First, no talking to the women, unless asked a question or receiving some sort of sign that you are allowed to speak. You may speak to other boys, but talk quietly and briefly so as to not interfere with the women's conversations. Also, boys shouldn't be distracted and must pay attention to the women in case you're needed. Second, no sitting on the furniture. That is for women. You are to stand unless Emma gives you permission to kneel. Third, any woman may play with you. Just spread your legs to give her access if approached. But given your petite size, I suspect you should be safe. Other than that, just be on your best behavior and do as you're told. Come on. Linda turned and headed down the hall, walking briskly. I hurried to follow her, the little bells on my new collar ringing with each step. We entered a large room, a living room filled with people. I saw an almost equal mix of women, all dressed in boys, all nude except for collars. Unlike a typical party, the women wore casual outfits, more comfortable than standard party attire. I saw no heels, and only a couple of skirts, bare-legged women with no hose. A few of them had makeup, lightly done as Emma preferred, but others were natural. It was clear that the women here felt they didn't need to dress to impress any men, so they chose clothes that were functional, easy to wear, and looked nice. A quick glance at the boys showed some were very hairy, some were lightly so, and most had shaved around their genitals. None were totally hairless nor feminized like me. There was also a range of cock sizes, a couple real big, but most average size. Again, I was an outlier, being noticeably smaller even with all of us soft. A couple of men also had PA piercings, the ring pulling down on their cock. I tried not to stare, but couldn't help taking quick glances at the large ones and those with a ring. Despite my interest, my face warmed up, as I felt embarrassed to be looking at other men this way. I followed Linda and most everyone turned toward me, in response to my bells. The women smiled and, like Linda did, looked me over with no pretense about what they were doing. The boys, if they looked, only glanced quickly, as if they were afraid to stare or make eye contact. It was sort of a shared embarrassment. We made our way through the room toward Emma, who was standing near the front door chatting with another woman. I always thought she looked special no matter how she dressed. Tonight she was like the other women, skinny jeans, a long-sleeve tee and ballet slippers. Her frame was slim and she was taller than most women, almost 6 feet in height. Emma kept her light brown hair short, had several piercings on each ear and loved bracelets and necklaces. Her only makeup was a soft lipstick in nude, which she liked because it helped keep her lips soft. She wasn't curvy like a lot of women, certainly not an hourglass shape with small breasts and long legs. Overall, she just looked perfect to me. When she saw me coming, she smiled. I could see her notice my collar. "Here's you, boy Emma. I'm so glad you decided to come tonight. I've enjoyed chatting online with you and was sure you'd fit in. I hope you don't mind the collar, but it is one of our requirements. All boys must be collared. I do love what you've done to his appearance. We've not had a femboy in our group before, but he looks darling. Oh no, I love it. I've thought of having him wear one, but didn't know how to introduce it to him. I like this, it fits him well. I think I'll get used to seeing him this way. I appreciate your compliments on his appearance. I felt those changes suited his body and helped me begin to neutralize some bad behaviors. Glad you like it. Most of us use collars all the time, although some let their boys out without them. Enjoy the party. Just be sure to mingle and meet all the women. You've probably talked with most online, but it's nice to make real connections too. You'll find they've experienced almost everything in FLR and chastity, so ask if you have a question. Thanks, I will. Madison here was just telling me about how the party started and some of the history of the group. Oh, that reminds me. If you need Liam to help serve or clean up, he'd be glad to do it. He's becoming quite domesticated around my place, but I want him to learn to serve in all the ways he can. Well, that is a nice offer, but I have our service boys lined up for tonight. I usually pick 2 for each party, a lead boy and a helper. Tell you what though, if you decide you want to come to more parties, I can have your boy be the helper for a few months. That way, he'll learn how to properly serve at an event like this. That can be real helpful when you introduce him to your friends and family. It makes it easier for the boy too, as they feel more comfortable knowing their role. Oh, I think we'll be back for sure. I'm already enjoying myself, but would it be okay if he wore heels when he served? I'm going to start requiring he wear them at home when he's cleaning, of course. I like your femme touches on him already, as they suit his petite frame. The conversation was briefly interrupted by boy carrying a tray of drinks for the women. I was given one too, but it was in a small ornate glass. While Emma had a margarita, I was told that boys are only allowed to sip sherry. I took a small sip and immediately regretted it, as the sherry was super sweet and not really enjoyable. But I took a few more as I needed some help with how exposed I felt. The women began talking, so I stood there awkwardly, listening but not intruding into the conversation. Then I was caught off guard, when Madison asked me what I did for a living. Before I could answer, Emma spoke up. Right now he has an intern position at the Felder Art Museum. He has a degree in fine arts, but there are few jobs available in his field. He took the intern position before we met, even though it doesn't pay much. If you'd like him to get a paying job, then be sure to talk with Anne. She's the petite blonde over by the fireplace. She runs a job placement agency. I know for a fact that she's looking for some clerical assistance for one of her primary customer firms. It is a sales agency, a wonderful place. All of the executives and most of the sales staff are women. The CEO prefers females in those roles and also likes the support staff to be males. Several of the boys here tonight work there. She could get your boy in as a secretarial trainee. If you want him to learn to serve women better, then it would be a perfect job. Can you type Liam? Emma allowed me to answer and I squeaked out a yes. I was so nervous and intimidated by what was happening that I sounded like a 6-year-old. Emma smiled and patted my rump like she had started doing at home, embarrassing me further in front of the small group of women. Although she told me she loved it, I'd always been embarrassed by its round shape, a shape more suited to a girl. Thanks so much for the information. I'll be sure to talk with her. I've chatted with her online a lot, but didn't know she ran a job placement company. I'd like him to earn more, as we're just about at the point where I'm going to take over all of the finances. He needs to learn that he should contribute his share economically as well as with his service, even if he won't be allowed to spend money himself. Plus, I like the idea of him serving other females. Being a secretary would be a perfect job for him. While it is a wonderful company, very supportive of the kind of relationships we have with our boys. I think they'd allow him to wear his collar there, although I'm not sure if they let him wear heels. The women all laughed at Madison's play on Emma's prior request. The conversation moved on to other topics. As the night wore on, Emma made her way around the room, with me in tow, mostly silent. She met all the women, including Anne. They had a long conversation, with Anne only asking me a few questions. When they parted, I had an appointment on Monday to see her. She told Emma that it sounded like I would have the skills needed for a job. This was disappointing for me, as I liked working at the museum. I'd spent a lot of time and money to get an art degree, as I was always interested in it. Hearing I was giving up a potential career there to be a secretary really brought home how my desire for a female-led relationship would extend to all of my life. But I had to admit, the museum had never promised me anything better than the temporary internship. We continued to mingle, as Emma continued to make friends. I also noticed a few women reach out and play with the boys. Stroke them until they were erect or just play with their cock sort of absent-mindedly. But none approached me. Emma was very receptive to suggestions about my new role, and she told one woman she loved the idea of keeping me locked all the time. As that was sinking in, Linda began to organize everyone. The women took a seat in a loose semicircle, their boys standing next to them. At the head of the circle was an empty chair, a sort of ornate armchair. Once everyone was in position, she got their attention. Everyone, it's time for the ceremonial part of the evening. It is especially relevant tonight, because we have a new addition to our group. I think this will resonate well with Emma and her boy, Liam. I may be mistaken, but I think she'll be a regular member from now on. To start, Madison, why don't you do the honors? Linda stepped to the side, and Madison came up front. She sat in the chair, legs crossed and smiling. Her boy, Danny, watched her sit down, then made his way toward her. As he approached, he knelt down in front of her, head bowed. "Dear mistress, I ask you to continue to take control of me. I wish to serve, obey, and worship you. I beg you to take my manhood as your own so I may focus totally on your pleasure and needs." Madison nodded her head yes and waved her hand to indicate he should stand. Taking a metal cage from her coat pocket, she proceeded to lock him in the chastity cage, tugging it to visibly show everyone how he was now secured. He then dropped to his knees again, kissed the toes of her shoes, and she clipped a short leash to his collar ring. Rising together, she led him back to her original chair where she sat, and he knelt beside her. Instantly I realized how this party fit into a female-led relationship and male chastity. This was a sort of certification ceremony, to show others how willing you were to submit to your woman and to become owned by her. Doing so in front of others solidified your commitment in a public way. Following her act, a string of women went to the chair one by one and received the offer of submission from their boys. Each act was slightly different. Some women put the cage on themselves, while others just locked it shut after the boy had put it around his cock. The short speeches seemed sincere, and I could see most were spur-of-the-moment declarations, even if most of the boys had been through this part many times. The chastity devices varied slightly too. They were all metal and mostly ball-trap designs, except for the two boys who had a PA piercing of their cock. Finally, all of the guests had participated except Emma and me. Emma stood up, smiling at me, and made her way to the chair. She sat down, her legs spread apart, and seemed excited. I was too, but nervous as well. Once she sat down, I approached her, head bowed slightly. Falling to my knees between her legs, I begged her to accept my humble service. To train me to please her. To teach me how to properly respect her. I promised to obey her every command. I hadn't planned any of what I said, it just flowed from my heart. She must have liked it because she smiled broadly, softly said she'd take me and motioned for me to stand. I didn't know what to expect next, as we'd only played with my old plastic device. Emma reached into her large purse, sitting on the floor next to her, and removed a device. A belt. A curved metal band, perforated with lots of small holes, was held by 3 metal cables wrapped in a bright pink rubbery plastic coating. A small brass lock held it together in front. Emma unlocked it and pulled loose the waist cables from the front shield. She held it out for me to step into. I was embarrassed because it was the only belt design used tonight, and I could see it had no tube or container to hold a cock. It looked more like a chastity belt designed for a woman. It also looked like it was set up for long-term, whereas it had a ring at the back of the shield that would be centered over my anus. Emma just smiled and pulled it up my legs after I stepped into it. She told me to put my balls away, inside me, so she could lock me up. Blushing more, I did as she said, holding them inside until the metal band was in place. My cock, which had remained soft and small all night, seemed to be even shorter as she worked the belt into place. Pulling the waistbands tight in front, she inserted the lock to hold it all together. The click seemed to reverberate through the room, but I knew it was only a soft sound. The belt fit snug, perhaps too snug around my waist. The rear cable was tight, wedged in my crack with the metal ring slightly separating my cheeks. The curved band had compressed my penis onto itself, so only the glands pressed against the metal. My shaft was inside me, as were my balls. Glancing down, it seemed as if I no longer had any genitals, making it a decidedly non-masculine look. After she locked it in place, she motioned for me to kneel again, and she clipped a short leather leash to my collar. Then, like the others had done, we stood up together. At this point, the other women clapped. A show of solidarity for Emma's step into their group. While they clapped, she led me around the small circle of chairs, like a show dog. I could see she was proud, both of me and the fact that she was taking control. After that short parade, the women stopped clapping and everyone stood again. Emma released my leash but left it hooked in place, as did the other women. They began to congregate, most welcoming Emma into the fold, a few with questions about my unique chastity. The boys also grouped together, although there was no discussion. What I noticed right away was how much more relaxed they seemed with their chastity cages in place. It was as if being caged gave them a certain status and a reason for their nudity. That they were proud of being in a device. I had to admit their cocks looked manlier somehow, wrapped in steel. Even if they were no longer free. Looking down at my new belt, I felt none of that pride. The garish pink contraption totally hid me, making me look smooth and feminine between my legs. That look was reinforced by the tight strap running between my cheeks like a girl's thong. When Emma had locked it in place, I had momentarily felt it wouldn't work. That it wouldn't keep my cock in place, as it would be too loose somehow. But as I walked in the circle, I could tell that design was certainly capable of controlling me, pressed tight enough that my cock or balls would not slip free. Emma might want to fiddle with the cables, later, to be sure they fit perfectly, but for now my worry was more about how long I might have to keep it on. My belt didn't have the look or feel of a play-type device, but one meant to keep me locked away for as long as Emma wanted. This level of control, along with some of the earlier events, made this all real. Emma's enthusiasm about me taking a new job as a clerical assistant and her desire to hold the financial reins of our relationship meant her control was expanding. Her comments about making me wear heels at home, my new smooth look between my legs with my polished nails, touches of makeup, and hairless body combined to signal that further feminization was likely. Even my collar, pink with rhinestones, which seemed like a fortuitous coincidence when Linda selected it, now became clear that it must have been provided by Emma, as her short leash matched it perfectly. I had wanted a female-led relationship where my partner would keep me in chastity. But now facing the reality of how such a relationship might actually work and be far different than my fantasies, gave me a jolt of anxiety. Lost in these thoughts, I almost didn't hear Linda tell the boys to line up to get their boxes. I saw the others moving to form a line behind her. The women were starting to gather too, by the front door as they said goodbye to the other hostess of the party. Linda led us down the hall, where she unlocked the closet. One by one, the men selected their box. They also pulled out their underwear and began to put them on. I had hoped we'd be allowed to fully dress, but it was apparent that we'd only be allowed to put on enough to keep us from committing public indecency. As I reached for mine, Linda tapped me on the shoulder. She held out a pair of panties. A full brief, white with red roses printed on it. "Here, boy, your owner told me to give these to you. Emma wants you in these from now on. I think she prefers a softer, more feminine image for you, and a full brief panty will work better than your bikini style with your new belt. Hurry up, boys. When you're ready, go around front, your women will meet you there." Like many of her pronouncements, I felt Linda said that for my benefit, as the newcomer. I put on the panty, cringing at how it reinforced the look of my smooth legs and polished nails. As I pulled it up to my waist, I saw how the crotch reinforced my new flat look. It was slightly controlling with some spandex fiber to make it mold tightly around me. I picked up my box, feeling scared about the direction my life was headed. The boys had begun to exit the back door, with me at the end of the line. Before I could leave, Linda again tapped my shoulder. I took Emma up on her offer for you to help at the next party. One of your duties will be to bring the cardboard boxes. We'll need a dozen or so. I'll call her with the exact amount. You'll need to be here a few hours early, as you will help us set up. I can give Emma the names of a few Uber drivers who know about our parties. They can bring you here early. Honestly, I can hardly wait. I expect Emma will have you looking much different by then, maybe with a new hairdo and more pretty makeup. Also let her know if she wants you to wear hold-up stockings with your heels, that's fine. We generally don't allow boys to have accessories, but you're the first real sissy in our club, so we can make an exception. You can also wear an apron when you're doing the prep work, as Emma tells me you do all your chores in one. Just be sure to pick a frilly one if you have it. Good night, and tell Emma we're so glad she decided to come tonight. Linda's assessment of me as a sissy made my face flush as I realized how I must look to the other boys and women. Plus, it would be worse next month. Emma had hinted at several changes she wanted to make in my appearance, including getting my hair cut in a real hairstyle. A female hairstyle. Going for a full makeover had been mentioned too, as she was not as expert in makeup as she wanted me to become. As I made my way down the steps, the cool air on my exposed flesh, the leash swinging from my collar, and holding the box with my male clothes in it, I knew I was headed on a new journey. Just like how I had to carefully navigate the open ground with my bare feet, I would have to learn how to make my way in this new world that Emma was creating for me. I had dreamed of this, and now that it was real, I had to admit it was the most exciting and scary point of my life. Coming out of the shadows of the alley, I saw Emma waiting for me, backlit by street lamps. I remembered what I had promised to do in the ceremony. Now it was time to fulfill those promises.